Nobody expected black SUVs to roll up to Queen Camilla's private estate. But on a quiet evening, the FBI did the unthinkable. They raided royal property. What they found could shake the British monarchy to its core. It started like any other, evening still, silent, shrouded in routine. Yet within minutes, that calm shattered. The gravel outside Ray Mill House, a private sanctuary far from the grandeur of Buckingham Palace, trembled under the weight of foreign boots. Doors creaked, open. Eyes from nearby windows widened. No official announcement. No prior warning. Just a fleet of black vehicles and men in sharp suits, carrying the kind of authority that didn't belong in the English countryside. The FBI, America's most powerful investigative force, was here. Not in London, not in Washington, but at the doorstep of Queen Camilla. Ray Mill House wasn't like the palaces people pictured when they thought of royalty. It lacked the security rings of Buckingham and the surveillance towers of Windsor. This was Camilla's retreat, a place hidden from the cameras, unguarded from scrutiny, and far more vulnerable than anyone ever imagined. That vulnerability now stood exposed. As agents crossed the threshold, they weren't met with royal guards or frantic aides, but with cold stares, quiet gasps, and questions that no one dared to ask aloud. Why were Americans here? Where was MI5? Where was Scotland Yard? What had Camilla hidden so well that her government couldn't or wouldn't investigate? The timing was suspect. The silence that followed was deafening. The monarchy, known for its carefully curated image of control, had just lost it in the most humiliating way possible publicly, internationally, and with devastating implications. If there was one thing the royal family guarded more fiercely than jewels or crowns, it was secrets. And now, those secrets seemed to be slipping through cracks not even they could seal. Inside Ray Mill House, every second dragged like an hour. The agents moved with calculated precision, sweeping the halls, opening drawers, and whispering into radios. Outside, word began to spread. Journalists scrambled for leads. Social media lit up. Royal watchers, stunned and breathless, asked the only question that mattered: what could be so damning, so urgent, that it forced the FBI to violate royal boundaries? The monarchy had weathered scandals before: affairs, divorces, even allegations of ties to known criminals. But this was different. This wasn't just another tabloid storm. This was a direct breach of royal sanctity by a foreign power. And it didn't happen by accident. Someone had called them in. Someone had told them where to look. Someone wanted this story exposed. But the real mystery wasn't that the FBI showed up. It was what they were searching for behind those lavish walls. Why would an American agency cross oceans to investigate a British royal? The answer lies in the money and possibly something darker. The FBI is not in the business of curiosity. They don't chase tabloid rumors or chase shadows without cause. When they move, they do so with purpose. Their jurisdiction may end at the U.S. borders, but when the ripples of a crime stretch across financial systems and shake the vaults of international power, they act. And this time, their trail didn't lead to a corporate tower in Manhattan or a remote Caribbean tax haven. It led to the doorstep of Queen Camilla. That fact alone sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles. After all, British matters especially. Royal ones are meant to be handled by MI5, by Scotland Yard, and by the Crown itself. Yet here was the FBI, boots on the ground, files in hand, and a target locked behind centuries of tradition. The world was left asking the obvious: why? And the answer, as with most things hidden behind regal curtains, may come down to money. Not the ceremonial kind, no golden carriages or royal jewels, but the kind that's wired quietly, in the dead of night, from one account to another, across borders, through shells, and under aliases. Billions sit beneath the royal umbrella, flowing from public grants, private estates, ancestral trusts, and foreign dealings. But not all of it is accounted for. Not all of it is clean. And not all of it is staying where it should. Whispers had already begun circulating in elite financial circles, large sums moving through offshore accounts, institutions tied to American, banks flagging strange transactions, names buried in ledgers, numbers that didn't align. Someone in the system noticed. Someone connected the dots. And suddenly, what seemed like harmless wealth became a potential web of financial deception. If even a fraction of that money was entangled in international laundering, if it crossed into territories governed by U.S. law, then the FBI didn't just have the right to investigate, they had the obligation. And when royalty is involved, every wrong move could trigger political chaos. Which is why discretion was everything, until it wasn't. The presence of U.S. agents at a British royal's private home wasn't just a break in tradition. It was a silent alarm that something serious was at play. Something that couldn't be buried by press statements or polished family portraits. With U.S. banks involved and the growing global scrutiny on tax havens, the stakes weren't just royal, they were international. And while the money trail may have brought the FBI to Camilla's doorstep, it was what they found inside that changed everything. Because buried beneath ledgers and bank records was a secret so personal, so unsettling, it had nothing to do with wealth and everything to do with history. But if this was just about money, why did they find something far more disturbing hidden deep within the mansion? Behind a tilted bookshelf, a secret door creaked open. What the agents found inside would forever link this quiet home to a royal nightmare. Ray Millhouse had always carried whispers of solitude, a quiet countryside retreat, a place Camilla could escape the public eye. But behind its polished facade, there was something far older, far more sinister, and far more intentional. The agents, operating under strict protocol, weren't expecting to find anything so cinematic. But instinct knows what paperwork can't. Confirm. Something about the shelf didn't sit right. A slight lean, a scuffed floorboard, a displaced breeze. One agent reached out, pulled a book that barely resisted, and the wall shifted. Not metaphorically, but literally. Behind it, the dark swallowed the light, revealing the entrance to a chamber untouched by time. And, apparently, by truth. The room was cold. Not the kind of cold that creeps in through windows, but the kind that holds secrets in its bones. Dust clung to everything, chests lined the perimeter, and locked containers stacked like silent witnesses. The agents didn't speak. They didn't need to. What they were looking at wasn't a simple storage room. This was an archive of omission, a sanctuary of suppression. They began opening the chests, and inside, history spilled out in silence. There were jewels unrecorded in any public royal inventory, ancient, delicate, some clearly from foreign lands, others far too unique to be a coincidence. But the jewels weren't the most unsettling discovery. Buried beneath velvet linings were envelopes, brittle with age. Some were torn at the edges, others perfectly sealed. The handwriting was unmistakable, some of it flowing and elegant, some of it panicked and rushed. And then, the names. Diana, Charles, Elizabeth. Documents stamped with chilling labels. Confidential, private, eyes only. These weren't love letters. They weren't simple correspondences. They were warnings. Please. Records. of conversations that never made it into the public narrative. One page, partially stained and nearly unreadable, appeared to describe an undisclosed meeting involving Diana, a senior advisor, and an unnamed official weeks before her fatal accident. Another referenced an offshore account again, tied to a name that had long vanished from headlines, but never from royal shadows. The room was more than a chamber, it was a contradiction. How could something so incriminating exist in a home so trusted? Why here? Why Camilla? That's when one agent noticed something odd about the floor specifically. The rug. It was newer, cleaner, and out of place. Beneath it, a metal ring embedded into the wood. He pulled. A low groan echoed through the chamber as a trapdoor slowly gave way to reveal a black hole of history, dug not just beneath the house, but beneath the monarchy itself. The passage was narrow and steep, its edges hidden in earth, silence pressing from every side. There was no hesitation. What lay beneath this tunnel was no longer about Camilla's home. It was about what the crown had buried and hoped no one would ever find. And what lay at the end of that tunnel would unlock a chapter of royal history no one was supposed to read. A hidden tunnel beneath a royal estate sounds like fiction, but this one led to a vault of power, fear, and possibly murder. The narrow passage swallowed the agents whole as they stepped into its suffocating grip. The tunnel was old, far older than the house itself. Damp air clung to their skin, thick with the scent of soil and secrets. The walls, carved with strange, almost ritualistic markings, whispered a warning that this was no place meant to be found. Every step deeper into the earth felt like trespassing into the heart of something deliberately hidden, an echo chamber of silence that had been guarded not by locks or alarms, but by time, privilege, and fear. This was no accidental construction. It had a purpose, it had meaning, and it was leading them straight into the monarchy's most guarded shadows. The passage finally widened, revealing a heavy, sealed door at the end. No inscription, no insignia, just a rusted barrier standing between the agents and whatever had been buried beneath decades of ceremony. With one unified push, the door groaned open, and what lay beyond it shattered every expectation. It wasn't treasure they found, it was evidence. An underground chamber, meticulously organized with shelves of sealed files, thick folders, and rows of photographs. No dust particles were floating in the air, and no signs of decay. This place was maintained, visited, protected, and yet no record of its existence had ever surfaced. The files bore names that turned blood-cold presidents, prime ministers, billionaires, entertainers, and royals. Some were living, some were dead. All were powerful. There were photos pinned to the wall like a twisted gallery of surveillance. Diana walking alone through Kensington Gardens, Charles speaking with advisors, William and Harry as boys, their eyes wide and unaware, Camilla, foreign royals, heads of state, diplomats. It felt like someone had been watching them all, documenting, collecting, waiting. And whoever they were, they had been doing it for years, maybe even decades. But the horror wasn't in the quantity. It was in the intent. Because in the farthest corner of the room, tucked behind sealed crates, was a locked metal box. It was heavier than expected, like it was carrying more than paper. Inside were cassette tapes, handwritten letters, and bandages torn from journals. The handwriting was unmistakably Diana's. One letter mentioned a meeting that should never have happened. Another reference is being followed and monitored. One tape, still unplayed, was labeled with a date just days before her fatal accident. A date that should have meant nothing, but here, in this hidden chamber, it meant everything. This wasn't just a collection of secrets. This was a carefully preserved arsenal of leverage, of silence, of fear. Whoever had built this room had access to information no ordinary person could ever gather. This wasn't amateur work. It was systemic, institutional, and it begged a question no one wanted to ask: who else knew this existed? Who had been guarding it all these years? And more urgently, how did the agents know exactly where to find it? Because something or someone had guided them here. But how did anyone know where to look? Who whispered the truth that led agents into this vault of lies? The FBI doesn't act on rumors. Someone close to the crown may have risked everything to expose the truth. Nothing about the raid was accidental. Nothing about the discovery was luck. The FBI's presence at Ray Mill House didn't begin with a casual tip. It began with evidence. And that evidence didn't come from anonymous internet chatter or a speculative journalist. It came from someone who knew exactly where to point them. Someone who had been inside the circle. Someone who had seen too much, stayed silent too long, and finally decided to ignite a fire, powerful enough to burn through centuries of royal protection. This wasn't just a case of national interest. It was personal, deeply embedded, and dangerously close to the crown. For months, maybe even years, someone had been feeding breadcrumbs. Not enough to spark panic, but just enough to draw attention from people who mattered. Quiet red flags, strange transfers, odd connections. Each piece is insignificant alone, but together they told a different story. A story of deception wrapped in tradition, protected by titles and polished with privilege. The theory of an internal whistleblower wasn't just probable, it was necessary, because only someone with access could have known about the hidden room, the tunnel, and the archives buried beneath that estate. Only someone trusted could have gotten close enough to pull it off without being noticed. The suspects weren't many, but each one came with weight. A former security officer who knew the layout, an ex-housekeeper who overheard what shouldn't have been spoken aloud, a financial advisor who saw transactions that didn't match the public books. Or perhaps it was someone even closer, someone with a personal vendetta masked as justice, someone like Prince Harry. His memoir, Spare, already cracked open the royal family's most private fractures. He didn't hold back when it came to Camilla, called her dangerous, calculating. According to him, willing to trade information and alliances to secure her image. What if he knew something more? Something he couldn't publish, but couldn't keep buried either. If Harry wasn't the whistleblower, could it have been someone within his orbit? A staffer, a confidant, a loyalist who saw an opportunity to finish what he started. The idea isn't far-fetched, because whistleblowers don't emerge out of nowhere. They evolve, they watch, they endure. And then one day, something pushes them too far. A final lie, a veiled threat, a betrayal. And they act, slowly, quietly, until the day it all explodes. Whoever it was, they didn't just reveal secrets. They pierced the heart of an institution. And the fact that they did it with such precision suggests one chilling truth. This wasn't spontaneous. It was methodical, strategic, and years in the making. But if this tip led to royal secrets, could it also lead to the truth behind one of the biggest tragedies in modern monarchy? She warned us. In 1995, Diana wrote, "My husband is planning an accident." Now, letters in Camilla's house may prove she was right. There they were, tucked away in a dust-covered chest, locked beneath layers of velvet and silence. Letters, not typed, not filtered through official aides, but handwritten, urgent, unpolished. The kind of writing you only produce when fear is clawing at your throat. The handwriting was unmistakable. The tone, terrified. Some were dated weeks before her death, others even earlier. But all of them carried the same undercurrent. She believed her life was in danger. And now, nearly 3 decades later, the very words Diana once whispered in fear may have risen from the shadows to speak again, this time louder than ever before. Among the pages were cryptic messages, mentions of pressure, of watchers, and most disturbingly, of someone planning an ending that would be made to look accidental. And it wasn't just the infamous letter to Paul Burrell, where she clearly outlined a fear of break, failure, and head injury. These newly uncovered writings extended the narrative, deepened the suspicion, and pointed fingers at people who had always denied involvement. Some names were coded, others not. There were mentions of meetings that never appeared on official schedules. Conversations that, if proven, would burn through the fabric of royal credibility. And it didn't stop with the letters. Journals were found, audio tapes, personal reflections painted a disturbing portrait of a woman trapped in an institution built on silence. On one recording, her voice cracked as she described a plan being whispered about behind closed doors. Another entry noted her being followed, not by paparazzi, but by cars with no license plates. She said she felt like she was living on borrowed time. She feared her enemies didn't want her dead, they needed her silenced. So why were these pieces of her story hidden away in Camilla's home? The woman long blamed for the collapse of Diana's marriage. The woman Diana herself once confronted and called out as the third person in her relationship. Was Camilla holding these as leverage? Insurance? A reminder to someone that she, too, held power now? Or was it something darker, an attempt to suppress the last words of a woman the world never stopped mourning? No one expected these pages to surface, especially not here, especially not now. But their presence reopens a door that was never truly closed. The official narrative of Diana's death, a tragic accident, reckless driving, and a hungry press, never sat comfortably with millions. And now, with her own words resurfacing, raw and undiluted, the question explodes back into the public consciousness. Was it truly an accident? Or something far more sinister? The implications are staggering. If these letters were genuine, and all evidence points to that, they confirm that Diana believed she was being hunted, that she suspected the people around her, perhaps even those closest to the throne, and that she left behind more than whispers. She left a trail now uncovered, in a place that never should have had them. But what if Camilla wasn't just hiding these secrets? What if she was being blackmailed to keep them quiet? What if Queen Camilla wasn't the villain, but the victim? What if someone was bleeding her secrets dry? The discovery of Diana's letters and the covert chamber beneath Ray Mill House painted a chilling picture of hidden truths and royal manipulation. But another possibility began to surface, one that twisted the narrative entirely. What if Camilla wasn't the orchestrator of these secrets, but the hostage? What if the files, the tapes, the letters weren't weapons she had collected, but ones that had been held against her for years? The theory that began as background noise suddenly took center stage. Blackmail. Cold. Calculated. Devastating. And if true, it changed everything. Hidden rooms don't build themselves. Secret safes don't fill up without help. And damning evidence doesn't remain undisturbed unless someone is benefiting from its silence. Financial records linked to Ray Mill House hinted at something strange: unregistered transfers, private accounts created through offshore intermediaries, and large sums disappearing into shell companies with no listed owners. These weren't the eye movements of someone hiding wealth. These were the patterns of someone paying to keep danger at bay. Hush money, paid regularly, consistently, and always in the shadows. But to whom? That's where the questions darkened. Could the leverage have come from outside Britain? Could this be the work of foreign intelligence operatives who stumbled upon the royal family's internal decay and decided to monetize the monarchy's rot? Or was it closer to home? Rogue royals, palace insiders, people with enough access to retrieve the truth, but not enough power to protect themselves without a weapon. Perhaps someone within the family tree, resentful, forgotten, buried beneath. Titles saw opportunity where others saw disgrace. And then there was Camilla's reaction. The public saw anger, urgency, and outrage. But behind the veil, insiders whispered something else. She wasn't shocked. She was furious, yes, but not surprised. As if she knew this moment would eventually come. As if the unraveling had already begun long before the FBI ever set foot on British soil. Her silence in the years prior now begged for an explanation. Why didn't she destroy the contents of that hidden room? Why allow something so dangerous to remain intact? Theories swirled like a storm. Some claimed she was protecting the monarchy. Others believed she feared Charles's downfall more than her own. But one theory stood above the rest, that she had no choice, that somewhere, someone was always watching, and one misstep would have brought her world crashing down. Camilla has long been painted as the woman who stole a crown built for another. But what if she had spent years wearing that crown with a dagger pointed at her back? What if the power she gained came with a price so high that it forced her into silence, into submission, into secret transactions that reeked of fear? Because if these payments were meant to keep someone quiet, who was she trying to protect? Herself? Her marriage? Or the fragile illusion of a royal family barely holding itself together? And if this scandal touches Camilla, how far does it reach up the throne? If this scandal grows, it won't just end a marriage, it could end a monarchy. The British monarchy has survived world wars, abdications, divorces, and death. It has endured scandal after scandal, each time cloaked in silence, smoothed over with tradition and charm. But this is different. What began as whispers in dark corridors have erupted into a storm that threatens the very foundation of the crown. Because this isn't just about Camilla. It's not just about Diana's letters, a hidden tunnel, or offshore accounts. This is about the rot at the heart of the institution, one that has been buried for decades and is now clawing its way to the surface. For the first time in modern history, the royal family is facing a crisis not of image, but of survival. The global public, once enchanted by the mystique of the monarchy, is beginning to turn. Trust has been eroding for years, but now it's crumbling. The idea that secrets this damaging were hidden not just from the media, but from the government, and from history itself, has shattered any illusion of transparency. The British people, already skeptical, are growing restless. Protesters gather outside the palace gates. Commentators once loyal to the crown are now asking dangerous questions. And the institutions that once bowed in silent reverence are beginning to push back. Parliament members demand accountability. Journalists refuse to look away. International observers call it a constitutional reckoning. And at the center of it all stands King Charles, a monarch who waited his entire life to wear the crown, only to find it now weighs heavier than ever. The scrutiny is relentless. Every appearance is dissected. Every word, or lack of one, is interpreted as either guilt or weakness. His silence, once a tool of royal dignity, now looks like avoidance. The pressure isn't just public, it's internal. Within palace walls, aides whisper of contingency plans, of private meetings between senior royals, of a fast-tracked future. For Prince William, should the current king falter under the weight of what's coming? And William? He's no longer just the heir. He's the fallback. The one who may be forced to clean up a mess he didn't create, but will inevitably inherit. Behind closed doors, his loyalty is being tested. Does he stand with his father, no matter what, is uncovered? Or does he step into the role of reformer, the modern king who dares to reset the monarchy before it collapses entirely? The silence from the palace is deafening. No statements, no clarifications, not a single denial, just carefully curated smiles and a steady stream of no comment. But the media won't wait forever, and neither will the public. The ghosts of past royal scandals loom large. Prince Andrew's fall from grace, the mysterious disappearance of files related to Diana, and the hush surrounding Charles and Camilla's early affair. Each time, the headlines faded. Each time, the monarchy survived. But this time feels different. This time, the world isn't turning the page so quickly. The calls for transparency are no longer whispers, they're roars. Every uncovered document, every hidden letter, every unanswered question adds fuel to a fire that may already be out of control. Because it's no longer about protecting reputation, it's about protecting power. And the longer the palace waits, the more people start to ask, what else are they hiding? The FBI came searching for evidence, but what they found might rewrite history. What you think, share your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.